When I was a kid, people often spoke of the American dream. It was usually described in terms of the hope that honest middle-class families could own a home, care for their loved ones, and leave their children better off than themselves. Many of my friends' parents had lived through the Great Depression, and some fought in World War II. They knew privation, grief, and sacrifice. It shouldn't surprise us that their understanding of the American dream was largely rooted in a sense of material security. And yet, I would suggest that this desire for economic security was undergirded by something more profound: the aspiration for spiritual freedom, the freedom to live in accord with one's conscience and to follow the teaching of one's religious beliefs. This reverence for Americans' religious convictions formed the bedrock of our country from the beginning. Some might say this notion of spiritual freedom belongs to the private sphere. It is a matter of personal practice and not of public affairs. Some might even argue that to debase matters of religion to those of politics is to muddy the waters of public discourse with pious sentiments. One of the most prominent voices of the American Revolution, Thomas Jefferson, a deist and one of the founders most influenced by the Enlightenment thinkers, Jefferson nevertheless wrote just 5 years after drafting the Declaration, "Can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we remove their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of the people that these liberties are the gift of God?" And to that question, Jefferson and his fellow founders would have said no. Rights, as understood by the drafters of the Declaration and the Constitution, are not conjured into existence by political consensus, nor are they granted by parliaments or princes. Our rights exist not on parchment alone, but on the immutable foundation of the laws of nature and nature's God. That is to say that even if the drafters of the Constitution disregarded a fundamental right to life, the American people, just like every people across history, can claim a share of that right, or that gift, as Jefferson recognized, because of the basic fact that life comes not from the government, but from God. This is the animating principle behind what the founders called natural rights. Rights inherent to the human person, not because of race or wealth or nationality, but because of the dignity bestowed by the Creator. As Alexander Hamilton put it 1 year before the signing of the Declaration of Independence, "The sacred rights of mankind are not to be rummaged for among old parchments or musty records. They are written as with a sunbeam in the whole volume of human nature by the hand of divinity itself, and can never be erased or obscured by mortal power." In our day, I fear that we are at risk of losing this metaphysical grounding of a person's rights. There seems to be no limit to the number or kinds of rights individuals can claim. Rights have become assertions of will, often severed from truth or justice. Sadly, deeply immoral acts are often defended under the banner of individual rights. But I would posit to you that this conception of rights is really a misconception. Rights do not exist just because we say they do. And here I call to mind one of my intellectual heroes, St. Thomas Aquinas. Aquinas rarely spoke of rights in the plural. Instead, he referred to the Latin word jus, which means the right, understood not as a claim, but as that which is due to another. In Thomistic terms, a right is what justice demands, as measured by the divine order. By this he meant something in accord with God's design for mankind and the universe. This is a far more substantive and sobering understanding of rights. It places rights not in the realm of popular preference or ever-evolving societal demands, but in the realm of respect for the human person and the common good. At the same time, the natural law tradition insists that these principles of freedom, justice, rights, and responsibilities are not hidden from us. On the contrary, these fundamental truths are accessible to all, discoverable by natural reason, written, as St. Paul says, in their hearts. This is precisely the claim made in the opening of the Declaration of Independence. that the American cause is justified not by majority will nor sectarian creed, but by the self-evident truth that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Importantly, the Declaration's appeal to the British is not a democratic one. The colonists did not declare political independence from their ancestral homeland simply because the majority agreed. No, the appeal of the Declaration was fundamentally moral and philosophical. It was a practical application of moral reason to political grievance. In the estimation of the signers of the Declaration, British governance had devolved from stewardship into tyranny. In fact, they all agreed in the Declaration that the Crown involved itself in circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy of the head of a civilized nation. This claim is not for mere rhetorical flourish, rather, it signals a moral judgment. The abuses of the Crown were more than an inconvenience, they were a grave injustice. The signers of the Declaration committed a revolutionary act, one that led to a devastating war. Yet they acted to restore the moral law that had been lost, the rights that we are given by God. And while it's impossible for us to know the thoughts within the hearts and minds of men, I believe it was the conscience, the inner witness of the divine law that stirred many of the founders to affix their names to the Declaration. Conscience is the key to understanding how the founders accessed the truths of the eternal law and applied them to their circumstances. The Second Vatican Council in Gaudium et Spes describes conscience as the most secret core and sanctuary of a man. There he's alone with God, whose voice echoes in its depths. The founders' defense of the colonists was not only an act of courage, but one of justice. Prior to America's founding, many nations only recognized the rights of a privileged few. But the Declaration laid the foundation for recognizing the rights of all Americans. Now, this promise of liberty was not fulfilled instantaneously. It took a bloody civil war and many courageous abolitionists to end the sin of slavery and respect the dignity of all persons. But from the very beginning, our founders understood that rights do not exist within a vacuum. With every right comes responsibilities to our families, our fellow citizens, and our Creator. In other words, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness does not render the political order neutral on questions of good and evil. It does not leave us in a naked public square, to use Father Richard John Newhouse's famous phrase. Rather, it presumes that citizens are moral actors, capable of discerning the good and obligated to pursue it. The Founding Fathers anticipated that the American people would not passively receive dictates from the state as distant subjects, but that they would actively participate in moral and political deliberations as citizens. This is why George Washington famously said in his farewell address, "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism, who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens." Today, nearly 250 years after the birth of our republic, we find ourselves the recipients of this great moral inheritance. For if our rights are real, then so too are our responsibilities. To be an American citizen is to be entrusted with the freedom to pursue the good, the duty to care for our neighbors and uphold justice, and the burden and the privilege of conscience. May we prove worthy of it.